Today we are talking about a word that everybody is talking about. And we've been experiencing this for years, since you were a child. And there wasn't a word put towards it, and now there is, and that's dopamine. What is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain. It is responsible for the feel-good hormones that we experience. It is the drive behind addiction. And we're talking about dopamine today, you guys, because if you are moving through something in your life, you might notice that your dopamine levels and your desire for things start to pop up and increase. I'm not here to talk about how we are all driven towards dopamine. It's like Dopamine Nation. I don't know if you've seen that book, but I'm definitely going to tag it in this video. It is incredible. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. It is true. We live in like a Dopamine Nation society, whether that be the reels that you watch, those fast-paced reels that move so quickly and keeps you moving on to the next thing, and you're so immersed into it that you're high on this feel-good feeling. They say watching cats gives you a boost of dopamine. The food we eat gives us a boost of dopamine. Shopping gives us a boost of dopamine. There are countless ways that we receive dopamine, and each one of our brains are designed a little bit differently in terms of what gives us that boost within our minds that make us feel good. Outside of the way we live a day-to-day life with dopamine, my focus in this conversation today is how dopamine will really pop up in a higher level, like it's ramped up. You're searching for it when you are moving through hardship. Because here's the thing, when we are moving through pain, when we are going through something, we know, or if you didn't know, the brain's number one job is to protect you and keep you safe. So thank you, brain, it starts to search for ways to feel good. Though these ways might be annoying as heck, they can be. It's like, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to tune into something to make me feel good. It helped in the moment, but I could take over from here, because we don't want to be a victim to something. And often when we are searching for dopamine, this is where the addictive tendencies come into play, and our conscious brain is not able to access the choices that we actually want to make. We are driven towards what's actually making us feel good instead. So as I was moving through so much of my grief, and still am, I noticed, oh my goodness, I am doing things and searching for things that I didn't before, or I did, but it's ramped up way higher. And this is what's really ignited this conversation for me, because I know I cannot be the only one. And this might give you the opportunity to look at some of the things in your life and the ways that you are moving towards these cravings or desires. So we know for having a bad day, you might want to eat something that's highly palatable. You might want that chocolate because it's making you feel good when you had a bad day. You might want to zone out and play video games because you just want to distract your mind from what you're going through. But next thing you know, hours go by. You might be scrolling on social media. I hear this with so many of my clients, and my gosh, if I've been victim to it. You're scrolling, and suddenly you look up at the time, and the time has passed you by, but it's because your brain is constantly going through this stimulation. This is all dopamine. Now, what I will say is sometimes we need a healthy distraction. So I'm not here to say don't distract yourself. If you are moving through something very challenging, you might find that you need a healthy distraction. It's when it's become extreme and it starts impeding in your life. It's when you start to choose these things unwillingly or not wanting to, and that's what we're going to get into today. Okay, some of the things that I noticed while I was moving through my challenges was my search for dopamine. Now, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you will learn that I have a history of OCD, and my OCD is very connected to food. And this is why I say each topic or each subject for dopamine might look a little bit different. It really is dependent upon what your brain likes. But I found all of a sudden I'm wanting a lot of sugar. My brain is looking for sugar, whether it be the sugary food. I was ingesting a lot of mints. I never do that. It's like I'm driving and I'm taking mints and it's like, why are you doing that right now? Well, these mints are sweet. I'm getting a boost of dopamine in my brain. Ding. Ding. I'm bored and I'm like, what can I do right now? I want to go shop. Why am I wanting to shop? Well, I'm going to feel good. Ding, ding. As I was moving through, I'm not even a shopper, you guys. I don't like shopping, but my brain was like looking on Amazon, putting things in the cart, eating the mints, wanting the sweet food. I'm not even a sweet ingester of food. I like more of that bitter taste, salty. This is dopamine. And how did I know it was dopamine? Well, because I rather have the sweet protein bar and then have my chicken and broccoli for dinner. I rather have the protein bar with chocolate and nuts and not the best ingredients and doesn't align with the way I like to nourish my body versus having the chicken and, broccoli. The dopamine will drive you towards behaviors that you don't want to do because you get that moment of relief. So when I noticed that these things start to pop up, I really started to evaluate. I started to write down all the things that I was using to make myself feel better, because ultimately it's a distraction from feeling my feelings. And that's really important, you guys. And that's why we're talking about this today, is that the dopamine driven factors that you are moving towards are taking you away from what you are moving through and what you are feeling emotionally. Again, like I said in the beginning of this video, thank you, brain. You are trying to help me through this, and I really appreciate it, but I'm going to take it from here. This is what we got to look at. What is your brain moving towards? So when I noticed this, I started writing it all down. And when I wrote it down, I was like, oh my gosh, this is driving me crazy. And you will notice that it might drive you crazy because you actually recognize that so much of your life is driven by these dopamine highs. And it's not all our fault, because society has really been created in a way that makes us move towards this. It's when we are moving through something heavy like grief and emotion, and we are choosing the dopamine versus actually feeling our feelings, that it can become really challenging because it doesn't actually allow you to heal. Instead, it teaches you how to distract yourself even more. So once I wrote down the ways that I was seeking out dopamine, I started to look at them and started to practice avoiding doing those behaviors, which in turn increased my level of anxiety so much. What you start to notice when you avoid the dopamine driven factors in your life and the things that you're doing to distract yourself is you'll start to notice there's anxiety here. You can start to see what's beneath the surface because it allows you the space to do that, because you're not driving towards that feel-good feeling to mask what you're going through. It might be anxiety, it might be sadness, it might be loneliness. There are a host of different things that you could be feeling that you haven't noticed within your body because you have been instead eating a full box of cookies, or shopping, or gambling, or playing video games and zoning out, or scrolling on social media. It's pulling you away. So how beautiful is it, and also ugly and hard, to choose to see what it is that you're moving through, to allow yourself to feel it so that you can actually heal it. So this is my suggestion to you, is that if you are noticing that you're moving through something and you're distracting yourself with dopamine, to write down that list, to start to look at it and not try and tackle them all at once because that's overwhelming for the brain. Maybe take 2 as your goal. Like, I'm not going to have as many mints today. I'm going to drink regular water instead of flavored water because the flavored water is giving me a dopamine hit versus just nourishing my body with something that feels good. The other thing I learned is that we don't always know how to ask ourselves what we need. Often this happens because we have spent our life taking care of others, listening to other people's needs, that we don't pause long enough to say, what do I need right now? And because of that, that's another reason why our brains choose to move towards dopamine, because going back to that inner knowing in the previous videos I've talked about, is that we don't reach inside to say, hey Rin, what do you need right now? Instead, we kind of drag her around and we say, like, get up, let's go. We got life to do. We got work to do. And we're living from a space of the mind, which only wants to feel good and doesn't allow us to connect to here, to make the decisions that actually make us feel better and heal. So learning to pause and say, hey, what do I need right now? What do I want? You will find a lot of success. So once I had this list and I started tackling these things and avoiding it, obviously the anxiety popped up and I started to feel the anxiety. But then what I started to do was say, hey, Ren, what do you need right now? What do you want? Not always successful. Sometimes my brain wanted what it wanted and went after it. But when it did work, oh my gosh, what you will find, and it will surprise you sometimes. It was like, I want to have the protein bar. No, Ren, what do you want? You want a warm tea and a hug? Like, you want a warm tea and a hug because you're feeling lonely. And that's why you wanted the protein bar, to just quickly feel good and get that dopamine hit, which will only last you for like the 5 seconds that you enjoyed it. And then you'll be back to feeling anxious again, looking for your next hit. I'm going to have mints in the car while I'm driving. Once we start to tune in, the beautiful thing is that the dopamine high that you feel from actually drinking the tea and taking time to feel your feelings runs on for days, because you're starting to heal the anxiety and you no longer need the distraction. So though the intensity of the anxiety and what you're feeling when you're not engaging in that dopamine-driven behavior is going to be really hard, over time, you actually start to heal, you guys. And this is why it's so important to look at these dopamine factors in our lives, because we can start to heal ourselves from a deep-rooted place. Something so cool that I noticed when I started practicing this, and by the way, like, I will be the first to say, I am not over all these dopamine-driven behaviors. I am still moving through some heaviness, and I see that the way the brain works, I'm still human. The brain will do what it does. It was like, okay, as I've been tuning in and saying, hey, Rin, what do you need? I have been making that inner version of me, my spirit, my inner child, feel loved, feel safe, and feel protected, and not dragged around by me from living from a space of the mind. So when I have had these moments where I feel weak and I want to engage in my dopamine-driven behaviors, my inner knowing and my spirit has come up to like rescue me. And this is so cool, you guys, because before, what you will find is you are acting from a space of the mind. There is no time in between to tune in. But now what's happening is Rin is like, I got you. You don't need this. We want the tea. We start to feed into our spirit, feed into our inner knowing, feed into our consciousness, feed into whatever version that is inside of you that you want to call it. And because we are fostering energy and building that strength and that trust within, that starts to be the guiding voice versus the mind. That starts to be the leading factor of the choices and the decisions we make versus the mind. Or when you do engage in the dopamine-driven behavior and then the guilt and shame comes in because now that you recognize it, oh my gosh, now you're beating yourself up for engaging in it, that inner knowing kind of pops up and goes, it's okay. We got you. Tomorrow's going to be good. The next day is going to be good. You're going to be strong. You got this. So there's a level of self-compassion that continues to move in. It is like absolute magic, you guys. Once you start feeding into you, this is where, I guess the best way to describe it is where ego meets spirit. And I always say, like, true alignment, true enlightenment is when ego and spirit have this beautiful dance together, because we're still human, which means we're still going to have human-driven behaviors like dopamine and oxytocin and the feel-good hormones that pop up. They're chemicals in the brain. They're neurotransmitters. Of course, they're going to be there. And if the brain's number one job is to protect you, it's always going to want to do this. So the more you feed into your spirit and the more you feed into yourself, there's this beautiful dance with your ego and your spirit that work together. People look at the ego like it's a bad thing. It's really not. It's here to help us move through life. It's here to survive us. It's here to keep us interact with people. It's when we can have these flow together and they complement one another so that you can live a beautiful and harmonious life that invites peace in. So to wrap this video up, if you are moving through something, you definitely have your brain working extra hard to protect you and make you feel safe. Unless you're some superhuman and your brain doesn't do that, teach me your ways, message me. You're probably doing this. I want you to write down, look at the ways dopamine-driven behaviors are showing up in your life. A great way is like what I said to you is like, oh, I want the protein bar. No, SabriNa, do you want the broccoli? If you're choosing the protein bar over the broccoli because you think you're hungry, it's a good sign it's a dopamine-driven behavior because you absolutely don't want the broccoli. You want the protein bar because it tastes good, it feels good. Tuning in to ask your inner knowing, what is it that you actually want? And getting to know what that feeling is, it will tell you. And if you go towards the behavior, you know it's dopamine. Write it down on your list. Start to go through the list. Don't tackle it all at once. What are 2 or 3 things you could practice to try not to engage in? There are different ways to practice not engaging. That could be complete abstinence. Don't have it in your house. Don't purchase it. Don't have it around you. Don't hang out with people. Don't hang out with people. Don't hang out with people that maybe are triggers to the experience. Don't go into locations that are triggering this experience. Obviously, you don't want to live from a space of avoidance either, but in the beginning, you might need that to try and get a handle on this dopamine-driven behavior. And then start to tune into your inner knowing and asking yourself, what is it you actually need long enough so that you could feel what you are moving through, so that you could heal without having this distraction and this high. I hope you have taken this beautiful experience away, and I say this from the lens of like how incredible it is to watch the ego and spirit dance together so that you can live in true alignment and harmonious behaviors that invite peace into your world.